It all started when two young boys met in their early youth. Their parents knew each other, so they were always together. The boys were named Eric II and Dennis Avery. On the island of Montserrat, an urban legend was passed around throughout the towns. Avery's great-grandpa attempted to sail the cruel sea. No one has ever sailed and returned from their journey. Even though they were little kids, Eric became eager and obsessed with the legend. Eric and Avery were inseparable. They did everything together. Walking to and from school and adventuring on the docks were their favorite things to do. They enjoyed looking at all the pirate ships that were tied to the docks. They were spectacular, 30-foot-tall masts with huge sails with clan logos. 80-foot-long ships, at least 2 stories tall. The ships were massive. Avery loved being with Eric, but most of the time Eric was just thinking about the story that Avery's grandpa told them. Eric was dreaming of getting on the open water and sailing the cruel sea. Sailing was his passion. While Avery loved sailing, he just wanted to fish. They were both passionate sailors, but Eric didn't work too hard to try to learn new ways to sail. He just wanted to get on the water. If you didn't listen, you would be forced to walk the plank. But he needed the group so that he could have a crew to take on the chores. Avery was determined, but he knew he had to learn everything there was to learn before trying to sail a ship. One night, Eric snuck out to get Avery. Eric had heard people talking about the cruel sea, and they would be at the bar that just opened up down the road. Avery squeezed out the window carefully but quick. The walk wasn't far. It seemed peaceful. They got to the bar, and in the corner these two men were discussing the cruel sea. Eric tried to overhear them, and he heard that the waters were haunted. Avery started to lose faith in the expedition. This didn't stop Eric. He still craved the adventure. 7 years, 182 days later. After years of sneaking around, sailing, and finding as much information about the cruel sea, Eric finally assembled a crew. The crew consisted of people who also wanted to attempt this expedition. Eric had been waiting a long time for this. Eric, Avery, and their crew set out to sail the cruel sea. Lots of food was prepared, including fish, burgers, and vegetables. Masts and sails were tight, the rope was tied, and the bunks were made. The first day was smooth, clear skies, crystal water, and fluffy clouds. But one member got sick. She was green, messy, her stomach was turned upside down. Heaving over the edge of the ship, more chunks spewing out with every push. She finally stopped and was ready to keep sailing. Eric was the captain of the ship, and Avery was the co-captain. The rest of the crew was evenly spread out amongst the ship. There was a guy with a parrot, 2 twins, and a few other sailors. A few more days passed with minimal wind. Slow moving and nothing special was happening. The crewmates were forced to row because the wind wasn't enough. Everyone was starting to get tired. Eric was becoming impatient, and the sea madness was getting to him. Later that night, Eric had sleep paralysis. It's like someone is sitting on your chest because your body is asleep, but your mind is awake. Eric saw one of the twins climb to the top of the mast, put a rope around his neck. He jumped. Right before Eric thought he heard the twins' neck snap, he woke up. Eric sprinted up the stairs to the deck. No one was there. He took a deep breath and stroked his hands through his long, brown hair. He had a look of confusion. He slowly dragged his feet back downstairs to the bunks to check on the twin. Eric exhaled with a sigh of relief when he saw the twin in his bunk. Safe and sound, at least he looked fine. Next morning, everyone was on deck. The twin that Eric saw in his sleep paralysis had scratches all around his neck. They were deep and bruised like marks. No one else seemed to notice them. As soon as the clouds rolled in and the wind picked up, Eric almost lost control of the ship. The skies were rumbling. It seemed as if the gods were mad at them. The clouds grew darker. The water's smooth layer turned into a dark blue wave. The wave began to rise. The guy's parrots flew away. They tried to follow the parrot because he would naturally head for land. As the parrot flew farther, his tiny image started to fade. Eric heard that other people had dreams too, but they weren't like his. They saw faces of what seemed like ghost pirates, except they saw them following the ship by foot. It was like they were walking on water, footsteps carried by the wind, as gentle as air and zero ripple whatsoever. Not having to row left the crew feeling restless. Soon the whole crew was in the bottom of the ship. Avery went down to check on what was happening. Avery heard clicking and clattering, cheering, and hands smacking on the table. It sounded like an intense match of poker. Every step Avery drew closer, the pounding got louder, the cheering got louder, and the rattling of the dice got to a higher pitch, banging his head with his hands and pulling out his hair, trying to escape the pain. He could barely walk. He had to sit down on the steps until it stopped. He took the last 2 steps, and he saw nothing. He soon noticed that there was a small group in the corner and 2 people sitting on their bunks. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon. Soon it was going to be nothing but darkness. Eric was still steering the ship when the sun went down. A strange light appeared near the front of the ship, blinding Eric, causing him to lose control of the wheel. The ship started to shake, and then there was nothing. It was almost time to take a break for the day. Avery was calm asleep until he started to have sleep paralysis. He saw himself walk up to the deck, and part of the crew had all been murdered by various torture methods. The parrot guy was foaming at the mouth and was out cold on the floor. The other twin had her wrist slit as if she was trying to climb something very sharp and jagged. Eric saw the rest of the crew, including the girl who was hung, and the girl who got seasickness had worms and bugs crawling in and out of her. And one more guy who was chained up and floating outside of the ship. Whatever Eric thought this meant, he was glad he didn't see Avery. This was obviously a disturbing thing to dream about. The thunder roared above the ship. Eric woke up. Suddenly, a wave crashed against the side of the ship, causing the ship to shake and sway. Eric needed to get back on the deck to captain the ship. As Eric was running up the stairs in the cold, harsh rain, he saw all the crew members dead on the deck, just like he saw in his dream. Eric quickly found a broomstick and wedged it into the steering wheel of the ship so he could go back downstairs and check on Avery. Avery was sitting up in his bed, looking straight forward, rocking back and forth while holding his knees. His eyes were pitch black and very alert. Eric ran over and tried to shake Avery out of it. Avery didn't stop. It was almost done. He couldn't keep it together. Lightning struck the boat, creating a big explosion. Eric shoved the broomstick back in the wheel and went to get Avery. Avery had stopped rocking and was standing straight up, looking at the stairs. Eric carefully walked on the shaky boat to grab Avery. Eric slung Avery over his shoulder and started marching to one of the lifeboats. Eric got in the boat with Avery and lowered it to the water. The ship had a huge hole in it after the lightning struck it, and was filling rapidly. Avery was in his sleep paralysis. He had been talking to one of the ghosts. He was telling Avery that he had a choice, and it was to kill Eric, or both of them would have to live for eternity on that ship, the sunken ship. The majority of the past sailors did not try this course with the crew. They went alone. So all the people that sailed the Luckwell Sea never had a chance to survive, but they were all living at the bottom of the ocean. Now Avery has a choice to survive and be the first to sail the Luckwell Sea, or to drown his best friend. Eric was rowing as hard as he could to get through the tall waves. Avery woke up. He slammed his hand in the boat to propel himself up and forwards so that he could sit up on the boat. "How did I get here?" said Avery with a nervous tone. Eric paused. "I saw you on your bunk rocking back and forth, and it looked like you had seen a ghost." The boat was cold. They had no protection from the wind, soaked. The waves kept engulfing the boat. They couldn't go much further like this. Eric was extremely tired. He was working off basically no sleep and minimal food. Avery began to row. The paddles felt warm. From Eric's hands, they were warm, but they were also rigid and uncomfortable. They were strange. Avery's hand slipped. A nail slit the palm of his hand. Avery became furious. One wrong turn and it set him off. "Why did you take me on the ship?" Avery yelled. Because I thought we both wanted this, and you're my best friend. Eric replied with a bit of a tone. Well, look what happens when you try to do the impossible. Bad things happen. We're on a small boat in the middle of nowhere. I'm tired, and my hand is bleeding. Do you think that the salt water helps? Avery was infuriated and said with sarcasm, There's nothing I can do about you and or the situation that we're in, Eric said sternly. Eric and Avery were struggling to stay sane. This was the end. Another tall wave. It felt like a brick wall crashing down on them. They lost an oar. Eric, out of instinct, dove and swam for the oar. The waves were carrying the boat further and further away from Eric. He was too tired to swim. He was giving it all he had. It wasn't enough. Avery stuck out the other oar to try to save Eric. As Avery was holding the oar to reach out to Eric, a bolt of lightning struck the water. The water lit up. Avery was blinded. His ears were ringing. In the distance, Eric. He was so far away he was face down in the water, with the oar still in his hand. Avery was in shock. He started to sob. The rain was pouring down on them, and the waves kept crashing in. Avery was so tired. He was bleeding. Avery ripped a part of his shirt off to cover and apply pressure on the wound. Avery was very cold, and there was nothing he could do, except lay down, curl up into a ball, and hug his knees for warmth. His pants were partially ripped and stuck to his body from the water. He had to tear off his shirt for the wound. His boots were soggy and heavy. He thought his life was over, but he couldn't give up. Avery was so tired it was easy to sleep, even though the conditions were horrible. The sky was blue, no clouds in sight. Crows were circling the sky like a black tornado. Some of them swooped down to catch some fish. Multiple crows were picking at Avery's rotting corpse. Little splashes of blood were falling down on the boat where Avery lay. Avery sat up as quickly and swatted all the crows off of his body and followed with a grunt after every swing. Once they were all off, he roared at them. Avery's whole body was hurting. He could feel all the crow bites now because before he was in a bit of shock. They went for his wound on his hand. It was bleeding even more than it was before, and it was infected. Avery sat down at the boat and began to think. He thought about how he was going to get back. In the past, he had survived, and he wasn't ready to give up. An idea sparked. Avery drop-kicked the seat of the boat. Avery jumped as high as he could and came down on the board with one foot. Snap! The seat broke down the middle, and his foot slipped through. Jagged slivers were impaling Avery's leg. He screamed in pain. He had splinters all up in his ankle, calf, and shin. Avery was trapped. Every direction he moved in, the wood pierced his skin even more. Avery had an idea. He would use the one leftover oar to break the wood so that he could free his leg and then pull out all the splinters. So now all Avery had to do was reach for the other oar. The oar was near the front of the boat and Avery was in the back. To grab the oar, he would have to hyperextend his knee. It was Avery's only option, so he needed to do it. Avery did as much as he could to make it hurt less, so he ripped off the rest of his shirt and used it as a gag. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3! Avery said out loud to himself. Avery threw himself forwards. His knee didn't snap. The weight of his body and the strength of the board holding his leg couldn't compare. Avery's poor leg just rotated, and many more pieces of wood got jabbed into the front of his shin. But he was able to reach the paddle now. Avery couldn't stand back up, but he was able to pry his leg out of the board and started to remove the splinters. More blood was pouring out as Avery pulled the long, jagged splinters. The water and the sky were very calm. Avery sat there treating the splinters, and then all of a sudden he saw a ship. Avery stood up and tried to get someone's attention. Avery used the oar as a crutch and tried to stand up. Avery began waving his hand to be noticed. After a couple of minutes of shouting and waving, the ship finally turned in his direction. The ship was quite far. Once the ship got to Avery, he heard voices and a ladder was thrown down. Avery fell into the water and struggled to climb up the ladder, one step at a time in agonizing pain. Once he got to the top, he flopped onto his back to take a breath, and then sat up on the edge of the railing of the boat, and there was only but ghost pirates captaining the ship, and no one heard or saw Avery ever again. To this day, no one has successfully sailed the Cruel Sea. The end.